All right, everybody, we're back with JerzWay DFS. Got my very good friend Andy Lack here of Odds Checker, of Rick Run Good Media, and of the world famous now Inside the Golf podcast. Andy, how are you living this afternoon where you are in the world?
I'm great, man. I just had a very solid range session. I got my big college buddies golf trip tomorrow. Little nervous. Haven't been able to
Yeah.
play too much. I'm gonna take some shit and lose some money if I don't bring my game. So, working on a lot of things at the range, but I'm feeling good. I get into this thing sometimes where I'm very technical. I love the golf swing so much. And so I play too much golf swing and not enough golf. And
Hmm.
I'm trying to free myself up a little bit, but I'm doing fantastic on this Wednesday afternoon. Always a pleasure talking with you, my friend.
Yeah, and I appreciate your time, and it's exciting. We finally got a full field event. I know it hasn't been that long, but it feels like a long time. Well, where are you and your buddies headed on your golf trip?
Santa Barbara. So we're
Oh, how
going,
nice.
yeah. So one of my buddies has his dad has a place in Montecito, and
Hmm.
they have like cottages at this course called the Valley Club of Montecito. So first time it's Alistair McKenzie course, first time ever playing in Alistair McKenzie. So we're gonna stay at the cottages and play there Thursday through Sunday. So I'm psyched.
Gosh, how
Yeah.
nice. That sounds amazing.
Yeah.
Here in Kentucky, we're getting supposed to be getting like 6 inches of snow and it's 20 degrees. So very jealous of you. Now, there's one question I do love to ask. Well, I should preface it with asking, when you're golfing with your buddies, are you a music guy, speaker on the golf course, or are you no music?
I I am all for like I'm not a stuffy like yeah, I'm so fine with music. There will be music on the golf course. That
Hmm.
is totally fine with me. I grew up playing tournaments and stuff, so I'm
Hmm.
fine either way. I'm used to, taking it super seriously, but I'm all for growing the game and making it less stuffy in those situations. Yeah, I have no problem with me. Are you a big music guy on the course?
So in my two clubs, so I'm part of the club I joined. You get two courses. Just because I'm so familiar and comfortable, yeah, I play music and we jam, and it's now just associated with playing golf is having the music on. But if I play at Valhalla Country Club, or I mean Golf Club, which is right down the road, and the PGA Championship will be there
Sure.
in two years.
Sure.
When
Of
I
course.
play there, no, it's you walk and you're focused and you're enjoying the spectacle that is. And but I just do it because at my club, or if we play just with buddies or go on golf trips, unless we're golfing at some place really nice where you just want to, soak in the moment and kind of be present and kind of appreciate the walk and appreciate the game. But the majority of the time, if I'm a weekend warrior, yeah, we have the music blaring all the time. And so if you had, with your buddies this weekend, you're stepping on the first tee. What song you picking that you're playing first tee, first round on your golf trip?
I think it's probably like the vibe that we usually go for. I mean, this, I feel like Grateful Dead always works on
Nice.
the golf course.
Hmm.
I feel like I'm not the playlist guy. I'm not big playlist guy over here. I usually
Hmm.
let my friends handle the playlist, and I will just weigh in if it's not something I'm loving. But it's usually like a classic rock kind of. I mean, I know you're a big reggae guy.
I am.
Yeah, we'll get some like some iration in there and some yeah. I think that guy he lives in Santa Barbara anyway. So yeah.
Hmm.
But yeah, something mellow like that, we're not like blasting techno out there. That's not really the
Right.
vibe we're looking for. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't really throw hip hop or rap on there anyway. But I love to ask that question. I love to get a little glimpse into your world, and I'm kind of you really sparked an interest saying you're going to Santa Barbara on a golf trip. So I'm going to live vicariously through you. But let's talk about golf. That's what we're here to do. And I'll just want to get your opinion before I share my screen and we kind of run down the board. This is an interesting event. It's an interesting event because we have a lot of golfers who haven't played in a few months. We don't have a lot of strokes gained data on a few golfers. Only a handful came from Kapalua and came over to Oahu here. So how are you just approaching handicapping for DFS, making a player pool. Yeah, just everything in general with some of these interesting variables of the Sony Open. Yeah, how are you attacking it?
Well, Rob, I always find these courses very interesting, whether it be YY or Colonial or Sedgefield or El Camalia and whatever. Um, Everyone's looking at the same things. Like everyone knows, everyone's going to tell you these are shorter positional golf courses that Webb Simpson is going to play well at, that Abraham Answer is going to play well at. These are the weeks where you can play Matt Kuchar. These are the weeks where you can play Zach Johnson, right? So none of that information is new to anyone. So the way that I try and look at it is, how can you zag a little bit, right? And I'm sure we'll get into it, but when you have a 30% Webb Simpson at the top, and, by the way, like I actually went back and looked, like Webb does well as chalk, right? Like Webb,
Hmm.
he doesn't typically bomb as chalk, right? How do you how do you make your decisions when you're dealing with a course where so much of the information is, there's so much overlap between what people are thinking this week, more so than any other week? Like it's harder to come in hot with an angle and say, hey, here's something about YY that you guys don't know, even though we've been going here since 1965. And you can
Right.
draw all these very easy through lines about this course and all these similar comp courses. So, it's kind of like a trickle down effect for me. You have to start with the decision of Webb, right? Are you playing Webb? Are you fading Webb? And if you're playing Webb, how can you get different in other places? And then kind of build from there.
Yeah, and I was going to ask. That's a great point. I was going to ask: do you think it's easier or maybe more difficult this week with the variables of, okay, we just don't have a lot of understanding of what kind of current form some of these golfers are in?
Yeah. So I typically, when it's something like this, course fit is something that I would probably lean on more. But as I just mentioned, you're not getting different with course fit really this week, right? Like I think
Hmm.
everyone's thinking along those lines. But yeah, something that I would say is my model for YI this week. It's far more dependent on corollary courses and past performance on corollary courses than it is recent form, because I don't want to be looking back at somebody's last 36 rounds on approach, and some of those rounds are from August, right?
Hmm.
Like that's
Yeah,
how is that relevant? These guys are PGA Tour
exactly.
players, they're grinding. We saw what happened with, I mean, I think they asked Rom after, like, how are you feeling coming off of this prolonged absence? And he's like, it's not like I haven't been playing. Like I'm
Hmm.
practicing every day. Like all these guys have
Right.
time now to work on their golf swing. So I think kind of at a macro level, Rob, I'd lean more so on course fit. But yeah, I would caution people to be a little careful with recent form when they're kind of going back 24, 36 rounds.
Yeah, and if I'm trying to understand or kind of guess, assume what other people in my contest are doing, I really imagine that if I'm trying to pick the sixth golfer in my lineup, or if I'm trying to trim my player pool, one of the tiebreakers is likely going to be, well, I'm going to look at the current form in the fall swing, even though it doesn't hold much weight right here in January 13th when it starts tomorrow. But I just still think people are going to lean on that because we want to see someone play better at the RSM at the Houston than having two straight missed cuts there, even though it doesn't hold much weight. And so I'm excited to talk with a guy about with you. Seamus Power one for comes to mind. He did play well last week, but I want to get your opinion on if you feel like he's overvalued, and we'll get to him. But maybe that's kind of an example. So if you're cool with it, you want to just hop on and kind of take a look on the board, or is there anything you just want to touch base with, or kind of share how you're just conceptualizing this week?
I want to talk to you about Webb because I flip
Hmm.
flopped on him maybe 30 times this week. I want to know if you're playing Webb.
So I am playing Webb, but I'm underweight on him. So 28%. Yeah, I definitely do not want to match the field and just have 30% Webb when he's going to be 30% because there's no leverage and I don't gain anything from that, and like we don't. So you're forced with two options with the guy like Webb. go extremely overweight or underweight or fade.
Mhm.
Now, because of your great point that traditionally on Webb courses and when he chalks, he holds up. But
Yeah.
a 15th here for Webb, we might think that's good. But in GPPs, when we're trying to win, I don't know. It depends on how the rest of the tournament shakes out. If Corey Connors wins and Webb gets 15th, Webb won't be in the winning lineup. But if Ryan Palmer wins and Cam Smith, Webb, and M all are finished outside the top 20, yeah, then Webb could be in there. But so I just feel like even if Webb finishes 15th or yeah around there, it's going to be hard for him to reach that value. But again, Webb has multiple, and I think in the last 5 starts, he has 4 top 15s and 3 top 5s. So his course history is solid here, and we know that. And this is a Webb course, so he can definitely finish top 5 and win. And that, yeah, kind of bites me in the ass a little bit. But as you know, great golf is hard to sustain, even if you're Webb Simpson. And when you were on the approach with me, kind of sometime during the fall swing last week, we even laughed talking about, gosh, is Webb still Webb? And he definitely
Yeah.
is, but maybe he's lost one of those B's in his name, and he's not the full Webb we're used to.
Yeah. You know, what you just said is true. I mean, last year he did finish top 5, but it even felt like the wheels were starting to come off a little bit because he finished top 5, gaining 9 strokes putting.
Yep.
My dilemma, Rob, is I really like Corey Connors. I think
Mhm.
I mean, I bet Corey Connors to win. I think he's good chalk. I think Corey
Mhm.
Connors is a great play this week. But if you're starting Webb Corey Connors, I mean, that is, you really have to get weird at the bottom. And that's the issue that I keep having is if I start playing, because yeah, there are a bunch of guys, Rob, that I like at the bottom. I'm not going to name all of them that are single digit ownership, sub 5% ownership, right? But
Mhm.
when you're starting Webb Corey Connors, I think you're a little hamstrung. I think it's just I have a difficult time believing, Rob, that Webb Corey Connors wins a GPP.
Mhm. Yeah, I don't think that. I mean, obviously it can happen, but
Of
it's
course. Yeah.
it yeah, but I 1,000% agree. It's very difficult to see that avenue. A lot has to go right. A lot has to go right to even win a GPP in any way. But then you're talking about you're going to have multiple 6 guys finish, in the top 15 likely. That is a very big ask for these 6K golfers, some of which are, again, or a lot of which are coming into no form. Uh, Yes, that's maybe kind of a GPP strategy that stars and scrubs, but I just don't think that's sustainable, especially with the big question marks of we haven't seen Corey in a couple months. We haven't seen Webb in a couple months. So, yeah, my biggest thing in weeks like this is why bite the bullet and buy so much ownership when there's more question marks than usual. And I love Corey. He's the highest owned guy in my player pool. I love him this week too. But still, if I'm looking at a guy like Taylor Gooch, who's our boy, and I'm going to scroll down and find him, he's at 20%. Yes, he played last week, and I know there's a trend coming over from Kapalua to here, but I think there's more question marks with Taylor Gooch than there are kind of check marks. And so I'm saying, why bite that bullet and take that 20% when there are those question marks? I'd rather invest on a guy like Kisner, who's much owner. I mean, yeah, he has his own question marks, but you get that ownership discount. Does that make sense?
Yeah. No, 100%. I mean, and that's how I think you want to play it this week. And Rob, like we talk about this a ton. I can't emphasize this enough. Like it's a different game. It's a different game that and I get questions all the time about, handicapping for because my podcast is primarily my Sunday show is primarily about course breakdowns, as you know.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a very stat intensive, data heavy, course breakdown heavy show. And that's why it's a betting show and not a DFS show, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
I will say, hey, this is a guy that I think may be low owned that I'm going to play in DFS, but it is a betting show, not a DFS show. And that's kind of what you have going with the approach. Like that's a DFS show.
Right.
And I think people need to understand the difference here. Like I'll give you a quick example. I really like Joel Dahman this week. but I'm seeing that Joel Dahman is, I believe he's 7.6K and he's hovering around 20%, right? Like when I did
Hmm.
my research and my handicapping process, Joel Dahman was a guy that presented a lot of value for me in the betting market and in the top 40 market, right? But the way
Hmm.
that I construct my player pool, Rob, is I construct everything on Sunday night. And I have a list of about 20 guys. I never play more than 20 guys. And I construct that pool before ownership or anything like that, or even pricing comes out. And what I do after that is I have a pool of about 20 pivots, right? 20 guys that maybe it's a little bit harder to make a case for. Maybe I
Yeah.
don't love them as much in the handicapping process, but is the difference like I have no problem subbing in Brendan Todd for Joel Damon, right? Like,
Hmm.
do I like Joel Damon more than Brendan Todd? Sure, I do. Do I like Joel Damon 4 times more than I like Brendan Todd? Of course not, right? And you have to be willing to pivot off of somebody that may have fit your handicapping process super well, because a 20% Joel Damon, it's not a good play. That's just not a good play over a
Right.
6% Brendan Todd when, as you mentioned so eloquently, there's more variance and randomness in these opening tournaments than you'll see all season pretty much.
1,000%. And this is why I love talking with you about this. And it's one of the reasons why I started just talking a bunch of shit on Twitter, in the sense of like shit that providing information, because we were reading so many podcasts or reading so many articles and podcasts, and they weren't distinguishing handicapping and DFS and weren't talking about ownership. But you get it. And I'm the same way with you. I have an outright on Joel Dahman. I
Mhm.
love him, but I'm severely underowned on him in DFS, and I'm severely overweight on a guy like Keith Mitchell, who's the same price. So I'm 50 in 150 lineups. I think I'm around 55% of my lineups have Keith Mitchell. To your exact point, I actually prefer Damon. If I'm betting them head to head and they're the same price, I actually kind of prefer Damon to kind of Keith Mitchell. But
Sure.
in DFS, gosh, he's only going to be 10%. And there's all many variables of randomness. Mitchell hasn't played in a while. Maybe over the holiday break he's kind of got the shanks. I don't know how he's coming into this, but a combination of the handicapping ability of his strokes gain information, his course history. He has performed very well at Wildlife Country Club in the past. So is Damon. But yeah, the combination of so many factors like the ownership and the leverage that creates, then Mitchell just has a stamp of such a great DFS play. But for your exact reasons, Dahman not so much, but he's a great bet. So I love how you distinguish the handicapping side from the DFS, because handicapping, in a short way, we're competing against the book. In DFS, we're competing against sometimes hundreds of thousands of other entries, not so much the book. So I love how you said this. Let's just run through anybody that on the top of the board. I know ownership is kind of spread out outside of Webb, but anyone you're really kind of leaning to. I know Na maybe gives us the most leverage opportunity, but anyone you're really leaning to up top?
Okay, so I think I'm going to play Hideki. Um, and again, this was a guy that he didn't. I kind of put my guys into 3 tiers, Rob, when I do
Mhm.
my handicapping and I go through the whole field. Guys I really like and would consider putting on my betting card. Guys I don't love as much, but I would play in DFS if the ownership is right. And guys I just have no interest in and I'm fading altogether. Hideki was in that kind of second tier for me. And I like the idea of a Hideki Corey build. Like I
Mm.
really, that worked really well for me in terms of um, where I wanted to go lower than that as well. The problem with Hideki, Rob, is, I mean, and there's a reason why he didn't fit the perfect, handicapping process for me, right? Is, there's a lot of concerns with he hasn't put well on Bermuda. He hasn't put well on these greens at all. He always plays the Sony Open. The Sony Open, I think, is an important event to him. I think the Japan Tour has a big, I think it's under Sony leadership and stuff like that. So I think Hideki is a solid play. But again, you have to start asking yourself when it gets to 2x times, right? Like
Mhm.
Hideki is literally less than half the ownership of Webb Simpson. right? Now, what do you think they would be paired up in a matchup? I'm sure we can find this if I look, but
Right.
would you put Webb as a minus 200 favorite over Hideki in this tournament? Like
Great point.
those are the kind of things that you need to think about and be okay pivoting. Like you're going to play some guys with red in their strokes gained, right? Like you're going to play some guys that it would be harder to jump on a podcast and make a case for. But that's how you have to play the game, and that's how you have to win. So I've probably doing, I would say my lean at the top. I still have some more thinking to do on Webb, but I'm going to do a lot of Hideki Connors to start. What about you?
I love that. I just want to speak on just that thought that is so brilliant of conceptualizing of if you put it in a matchup, yeah, it would you really think Webb Simpson, I mean, is going to be minus 250? That is such a beautiful way to look at it. I really kind of love that. I actually like Kevin Na a lot for like not for the same reasons. And obviously has a little bit better course history here. Won here last year. Kevin Na is a great putter, great Bermuda putter too. Didn't putt well at Kapalua, but actually kind of played decently. Kind of some of these other strokes gained metrics. So I think we can get some positive regression with Kevin Na. But one thing that happens that I do want to speak on is if I do like Webb, and if I'm not conceptualizing how you just said so well about kind of maybe considering it a matchup. One of the negatives that comes from the kind of maybe Twitter community is then just like confirmation bias. So if I see betting cards and people have a ton of Webb, or we're listening to podcasts, people are saying Webb has great course history, even at Fanshare, he has the two flames right here. Well, that gives me confirmation bias. This is a gosh, well, I just confirmed that's a great play. I can't get off them. And so we start thinking in tunnel vision where we say, again, I have to play him, I have to lock him in, I have to do this, and then creates fear. Like, what can go wrong if I don't? Or what if I pivot to Hideki? Well, everyone's talking about Webb, which creating that confirmation bias, and that human element is what kind of really takes our kneecaps away in DFS. So that's just adding on to that. I like Kevin Na a lot. I'm surprised he's 12% with kind of how well he played at Kapalua. Has struggled kind of the back nine on Sunday, but I think starting Sunday he was within the top 15, and had a go. I think he was 3 under through his front nine, all the way got up in the top 10, but it struggled on the back. We both like Corey. We don't have to kind of sit with that. What are you doing with? I think this range right here with Gooch, Kisner, Horschel, and Kokrak, Henley, and Jones. I think if you can get that range right, you're going to do well in DFS. What do you think?
Well, the second guy I wanted to ask you about is Henley, because Henley is the guy that I said this in my Sunday show, Rob. I said, if Henley doesn't look extremely attractive to you from a handicapping process, you're doing something wrong. Now, I expected to not bet Henley this week because at these type of events, I typically think that they're going to overprice Henley and he's going to be 22-1, which he is at some books. I got a 41-1 on Russell Henley, so I ended up betting Russell Henley, but they put him, I think, a little low in DraftKings. You can argue that, but I think a little bit low for what I had my projections, just based on this type of event where everyone seems to gravitate to Henley. So he's 26%. That's extremely problematic, right? Especially with when I try and stay, Rob. I always try and I'm curious what you do about this. I guess it changes based on contest and stuff like that, but I try and stay below 70% total. I do my best to do that. I think that's a pretty good number to stay below. And when you're dealing with Henley up here again, it's like the rule of two, right? Like it's the 2x rule you start to see. Like I have no problem with a 1.2x rule, but once you start to get to the 2x rule with these guys like Kokrak and Jones, I'm having a difficult time. I think I probably may end up pivoting a little bit to Billy. I think I like Billy a little bit more than Kokrak. And I know I've heard word that you love Matt Jones. I need you to sell me on that one, because I would have normally pushed back on that, but I'm curious to hear your case on on Jones, because I think you're buying him right now at the absolute peak. Like, what is Jones, Rob, if he finishes 15th last week? 7K?
Well, yeah. So I actually talked about it on Monday with Andrew from Fanshare and said, I wish he didn't play well at all last week because likely he's only 12%, but likely that might get cut in half to 6%. But if we study Matt Jones just in the last 2 years, his history, and I might fudge here on the numbers because I don't have it in front of me, but over his last 51 starts, Andy, he's only gained strokes on approach 13 times, and that included last week at Kapalua. And so we know he kind of won or set the PGA Tour record for 36 holes, like aggregate under par. And so, yeah, he kind of lit it up over the weekend. What Matt Jones does well is he's pretty good off the tee, but excellent around the green and putting.
Mm-hmm.
Out of those 13 times he had strokes to ground or gained strokes on approach, was at the Honda. That's where he won. He blew away the field. He was just on fire. He's a streaky golfer. One of the other times was at the Sony last year where he was T11. He also, I believe, is top 10 in the field putting at the Sony Open at Wildlight. I think he's number 5. If go back and read my Fanshare blog because it's written up about him. And so I'm thinking, okay, here's a guy that the strokes gain data never really support him playing well, and rightfully so. He doesn't win every year. He doesn't have a lot of top 10s. But when he can kind of grind around, and that's something we need to do a Wildlight, around the green is very important here. We have, putting. It's kind of a putting contest. The surface here is easier than most. There's not as much undulation like Kapalua. So what I really love about Matt Jones and why he's high on my card and why I have him as an outright too, is obviously the price and the salary. But this idea of Matt Jones does not need to kill it tee to green in order to win. And if he does gain strokes on approach, he usually contends. Again, when he gains strokes on approach, he usually contends. I think he lost under 1 on approach at Kapalua, finished 3rd. So I want to buy that upside is like we hope and like we invest that, gosh, if this golfer can just gain strokes putting, he'll do well here. Well, I'm investing because we have back class on Matt Jones that he's going to putt well because he ranks top 10 in wildline putting. And I'm going to go the other way and say, if he can just gain 1 on approach, Matt Jones likely finishes top 10. And he's gained on approach here before. So I really love him, especially at 12% ownership. But I do get your point that, hey, he hit a ceiling last week and there might not be much room for upside. But I still think I want to give him 1 more week just because of some course history and how well he's done here. Does that make sense?
Of course. No. And listen, that's fair. I mean, I think a 12% Matt Jones is a better DraftKings play than a 26% Russell Henley. I mean, I don't think that's debatable. I have no problem playing Matt Jones. I'll plug him in there happily. He was in, like Hideki, he was in the maybe pivot category. I just had him priced a little bit lower. It's an issue this week because a lot of the guys that and it doesn't always shake out like this, but a lot of the guys that I happen to like are like Seamus at 16 is annoying for me. I like Seamus this week, and I made the case. And I don't think I have any legitimate pull in this industry whatsoever. But I've gotten a couple. Yeah, you sold me on Seamus, and I feel like he picked up steam as the week kind of went on. I kind of made the analogy, Rob, where I said this feels a little Gucci to me, where the numbers are great for a really long time, right? And guys like me and you identify that there's something with Taylor Gooch. And then on a week where maybe the chatter is a little bit lower, he hasn't played well at this course. Maybe the discussion on him is a little bit quelled because he hasn't maybe delivered as fast as people have wanted him to deliver. That's when he wins. And that was what I kind of thought was the vibe that I was getting with Sheamus this week. But now it seems like the secret's out on old Sheamus. So I kind of between a rock and a hard place. And I also really like Cameron Davis. But what are
Yeah.
you kind of doing in these? If you're going, are you kind of is Jones your only big guy in the 8s, or are you drifting down? And what are you doing with Sheamus? I want to know your take on him, because the 16%, it's a weird number for me.
Yeah. I'm a full fade on Sheamus, and not
Okay,
because
that's good. That
not
helps.
not because I don't think he's going to perform well. It's just, I don't want to bite all that ownership for a lot of question marks. Yeah, he had a great kind of into the season and into the fall swing. And he won the Barbasol here in Kentucky, but he's just a little unproven for me. And that's a great example. I didn't think of it like when we got on Gooch very early. But for me, I just don't see the same patterns as Gooch. But Gooch was, I'm not going to say obvious, because only, not to toot our own horn, only you and I got out in front of him. But it's, I don't see that same way with Siemens. And I could be wrong, could be missing something, but it's just a lot to bite within that almost 17% for
Mhm.
a guy like him. And so I'm just full fade and just hoping that maybe he's sick this week and doesn't play well. But speaking of Gooch, I want to get your opinion on what you're doing with him.
I'm fading him completely. I mean, I don't
Yeah,
have.
me too.
I would play him at. I would, if it was between him and Billy, and him and Billy had the same
Mhm.
ownership, I'd play Gooch, I think, but I wouldn't play Gooch this week at over 15%. I
Yeah, I
just,
agree.
as I like Corey Connors a lot, right? And like I said,
Hmm.
I'm having a difficult time with Henley. I'm having a difficult time with Sheamus. Um, I can't get there. And I think Gooch is a fantastic player. I don't think that what we saw at the RSM was a flash in the pan. Like, I think he's going to have a good season. I'm looking to play him at courses like Riviera and the Players as we go forward. But I think his price is at an all-time high, right?
Hmm.
And I would prefer to take my chances on him, maybe like an 8.2 Gooch at Torrey Pines or at
Hmm.
Riviera, I think is a sensible time to get back on.
Yeah, I like that. I like that a lot. Or even, I don't know if he's in the field next week.
Sure.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah,
He's played well there. He plays well
yeah,
everywhere. Yeah.
yeah, he does. Oh, yeah, and speaking I like him at the Players too, which we wouldn't think of that as, I know, well, kind of maybe, but he had he finished third at the Players last year. Yeah, I think he can go perform well again. I just want to say I'm a little worried about Billy Horschel last week. You played terribly tee to green at Kapalua and really was bailed out by the putter. But Billy's a grinder. He never is going to blow you away with strokes gained. And I just want to throw, we talked about Russell Henley a little bit. I just want to give out a kind of a take with Russell Henley. A, Traditionally an excellent Bermuda putter, and early in his career, he was known as one of the better putters. Kind of struggled overall last year. Had some good tournaments where he kind of putted well, but it was kind of a down year for Russell Henley putting. And he had great tee to green numbers, great approach numbers. I think the kind of stars aligned where he kind of gets back to putting how he usually does, and the ball striking kind of stays how it is. I think Russell Henley is gonna have a big year. I know that's not so much a hot take, but I think things are gonna happen well for him this year.
Can I add one more thing to Billy too that you just made
Oh,
me think
please.
of? I think a
Hmm.
lot of people are going, like, I believe Billy lost 8 strokes on approach last week. And
Hmm.
I think a lot of people are going to say that doesn't matter at all. Look at Kevin Kisner, who lost 15 strokes on approach at the St. Jude's and then came back the next week and won. Siwoo Kim did the same thing in Memphis. Siwoo Kim lost like 16 strokes on approach in Memphis, finished second in that tournament. The difference
Hmm.
between Memphis and Kapalua is that the reason why Kisner and Siwoo had those terrible approach weeks is because they made a quad, right? They had a couple water balls where they had
Yeah.
one hole where they lost 7 strokes on approach on one hole, right? There's no water at Kapalua, right? So if you lost 8 strokes on approach at Kapalua, that just means you were consistently bad across the board, right? There wasn't
Hmm.
one blow up. There's not a lot of trouble at Kapalua. There's not a lot of hazards,
Yeah.
especially on your approach shot. So I would say the 8 strokes for Billy is a concern.
Yeah, I agree. And that's a great point. And actually, Dom had something similar at Kapalua. I think it was Saturday where they stopped doing lift clean place, and on the second hole, he hit it up short of the green, picked his ball up, got a stroke penalty, and that hurt his stroke gained around the green. And you can kind of, I think you go in and kind of see that. So that's some of the inside information you get listening to Andy. So that's great. Andy, what do you think about this 7K range? I know we're running low on time, so we'll
Yeah.
spread it out. Yeah, what do you think about the 7K range? Who stands out? Who's a big play?
It's so tough, Rob. I could do this with you for like 3 hours. I know we're short on time, so
Mhm.
I'll just give you a couple quick hitters. I love Bezadenhout.
Yeah.
Bezadenhout might be my favorite play on the board, and that high eights is going to allow me to probably end up avoiding Seamus and Henley because I'm playing Bezadenhout and Palmer.
Mhm.
I'm playing both of those guys. Just quickly on Palmer, I think you're still buying relatively low on him. This is a guy that finished, he has top 5 upside, right? Like he finishes in the top 5. He did it a couple of times last season towards the beginning of the year, really fell off a cliff there for a little bit. But
Mhm.
you started to see at kind of a macro level it come back around as the season progressed. So I think this is a good buy low spot on Palmer. He's won here before. He's played here 15 times, but kind of
Yeah.
in that range that you have up, Bezadenhout, Hoagie, I love, and Palmer for me.
I love it. And we kind of think the same way. So on all those guys. Yeah, Ryan Palmer, I love. I think he won in 2010. Played well in 2016. I think had a top 25 or top 5. I mean, so yeah, definitely upside with them. My favorite play in this range though is Keith Mitchell. I already talked about that. Now getting into kind of the lower range. This is where things gets tough. Usually, I love and I live in the 6K range. Not so much this week. Who are you liking? Maybe lower 7, and then maybe 6K, a 6K guy that you really like.
I like a 7% Grio at
Mhm.
7.3. I think that's okay. I think Stu Sink is a name that I've heard a lot of buzz about this week. That's no problem to me. But for me, I'd rather play Norlander. I'd rather play
Yeah.
a 2% Henrik Norlander. And you have Knox, I think, right there at the bottom. I'm playing a lot of him too. I think he's
Mhm.
4%. So I'm playing a lot of Norlander, a lot of Knox. And I agree with you, Rob. I found myself a ton of guys in this low 7s, very high 6s, but I wasn't going dumpster diving this week for whatever reason. I think the lowest guy that I have in my player pool is 6.8. By the way, 0.47% Brian Stewart. Like you could do a lot worse than that. Like Stewart checks a lot of boxes from a course fit standpoint. He was a maybe for me, but I think that's like a fantastic pivot. If you're looking, Stewart is the type of guy you would expect a lot of people. This is a week where Stewart should garner ownership, right? And
Right,
if
right.
if fan shares onto something and they're correct about Stewart, I think he's a great play.
Oh, 1,000%. And the same thing that I passed up, I think, because Stewart, I think ranks in the top 10 in strokes gained total at Walleye. I don't have that in front of me, but who's number one and I think he's second in DK points at Walleye is Charles Howell the third, CH3. Haven't even talked about him, but he's coming in around 10% ownership. So him and Stewart, I think, are very similar. Both older guys or seasoned vets. I love that call. I like Zach Johnson a lot. He
Yeah.
showed the ability to make a bunch of birdies, I think, at the RSM to kind of close the year. Again, that's a course that fits him. But Zach has played well here in the past, been in contention a lot, had some low rounds. Really like Zach Johnson. And a 6K guy I will mention, because I know you're a fan of him, is the Pepperdine Wave, and that is Thigala. He does struggle off the tee, and he puts his trajectory with this ball flight off the tee. He likes to work it. You take driver out of his hand, you won't need a lot of driver this course. And I think it's similar to Gooch, is that when you take 3 woods or kind of driving irons off the tee, it's going to play in the hands of Thigala because he can kill it on approach. We saw him play well in Mississippi, make a ton of birdies. I think we see him return to form, and I have some shares of him kind of in the 6K range.
Yeah, of course I'm playing Thigala.
Yeah,
And can you go to McGreevy, who's 6.9 for a second?
yeah.
Okay, so absolute
Wow.
shots fired at
Yeah.
Inside Golf Pod and all the content that I do. Fanshare, I exist. Like, you can listen to my content once in a while. I've been pumping this guy up all week. Clearly not a listener to IGP, but yeah, I like McGreevy. I don't believe that 0% ownership. I'll raise my hand. I'm there. He's 4% max,
Mhm.
right? So I still think he's a great option. Again, with these guys, when you have a limited sample size, I have a difficult time sometimes, Rob. I know we're done on time, but just answer this quickly. With guys like Max McGreevy and Mike versus a guy like Michael Thompson, are you rather taking the known quantity or the unknown quantity? Because we kind of know what we're getting with a Michael Thompson or a Brandt Snedeker, right? If they have a good week, they're finishing T17, right? And probably
Mhm.
maybe they're a little safer than Max McGreevy, but we don't know how good McGreevy is. We don't know how good Thigala is. So how do you kind of get where I'm getting at there?
Oh, 1,000%. Yeah, and GPPs always go with the upside. And we know the upside of Michael Thompson. We don't know what Max McGreevy's ceiling is. And so it could be high, super low. So why not buy low on him right now? And so I'm all for every opportunity like that, even if it doesn't work out. Like I was on Davis Thompson and early in the fall swing, and that didn't work out as much.
We were together, right? Wasn't that
Yeah.
RSM? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So, but yeah. Anyway, I love you. Get on the upside. It's 6,900. If he finishes top 10, he's not going to be 6,900 anymore. And so buy low. And I love that comparison and how we know what Michael Thompson is. We don't know what Max McGreevy is, and let's buy low. And if we're playing GPPs, we want the upside, and he's going to be low owned because he has very little history, unless you listen to Inside the Golf podcast.
Last question, Rob, for you. And I know I'm the guest, but I don't want to take up too much of your time. I could talk to you all day. Are
Oh,
you
me too.
playing? Are you playing like a 10% Swafford? Because that was another guy that worked out really well for me in the handicapping process, but he seems to be the chalky 6K guy, and that smells bad to me.
No, I'm not playing Swafford. I am playing a 10% Brandt Snedeker, though. But maybe to your point, who is the excellent Japanese tour player who played well at the CJ Cup? It's I'm not gonna say it's like Kitanama. I think
He's
he's
lower.
72.
Yeah. John, I thought he was 68. John talked about him on my Tuesday show. Are you talking
Mhm.
about the amateur that's 21?
No, I'm talking about the 23-year-old who has he's won 3 times on the Asian Tour last year. He finished 7th at the CJ. 23-year-old. He's like the next Japanese thing. And I thought, oh, here he is. Yeah,
Oh,
Kanaya.
Kanaya.
Th-
Yeah.
yeah, this guy. So what's his ownership? Almost 4. The same thing with McGreevy. This guy's a top 10 machine on the Asian Tour. Again, won 3 times, I believe. Finished 7th at the CJ. I would imagine that this is his type of course. But the same thing with you talking about McGreevy. I think I'm like 12 to 15% on him, just with hopefully getting that upside. And
Yeah.
he's ranked 50. He's ranked 51st in the world.
Yeah. I like that. And I think 12 on Denny feels low. I could
Mm-hmm.
see Denny being 15. I haven't heard a peep about Keegan this week. And Keegan's a
Yeah,
guy that
yeah.
people like. People like Keegan. Like, we get to Colonial and we get to Innisbrook, people will be betting
Mm-hmm.
and talking about Keegan. So that's another interesting one is too, if you're trying to pivot off the Denny chalk. I need to do a deeper dive on Kanaya. I like that.
Yeah, and it would be so Keegan to have a top 5 when nobody's on him this week. That would just be likely what
Dangerous.
happens. That
Yeah.
is dangerous.
Yeah.
Well, Andy, I appreciate your time. I'm going to give a shameless plug because you and I are going to be out in San Diego in a couple weeks at Torrey for the Farmers. So if anybody's listening or out there is going to be out there, come say hi to Andy and I while we're going to watching some golf. But Andy, I really appreciate you, what you do for the community. You're really one of the good ones. You kind of have a great balance of spreading incredible knowledge. You're extremely helpful, but also just a good person. You're good people. So appreciate your time. Anything else before we sign off?
No, that's it, buddy. Rob, always a blast. Anytime with you. Like I said, I could do this with you. I could pick your brain for 3 hours. So happy to hop on with you anytime. I'll get you back on my pod pretty soon, and can't wait for Tori, my friend.
Yeah, me too. Well, and appreciate Jers. Thanks for doing this, and best of luck, everybody. We'll see you on the leaderboards.